Yes. Do not touch microphone. Okay, if everybody is ready, we'll get started here. My name is Burton Lee, and this is Robin Miller, and we are going to be presenting some information as an update as to where we are as a C committee. And I'd like this to be interactive, but I'd also like to focus on what we're trying to accomplish. So to the extent that we happen to have questions that are not addressed in the presentation, we'll be around afterwards and more than happy to address any questions that anyone might have. So if we could go on to the next slide, what I thought would be helpful initially is just to give you an idea of what the C committee process has been. So the first thing that we did is we identified what are some of the potential scenarios of what we can do. And we'll get into those here in a little bit later in more detail. And what data do we need in order to make informed decisions? And so we've been in the process of gathering data to help with that. And so our appraisal is complete, and that's the primary focus of the discussion today. And the renovations, construction costs, we're still gathering that information right now. Once we have that data, we're going to be doing some financial analysis and analyzing risk factors. Risk factors is what we're really considering. What's the probability of this actually happening? So for example, if we come up with a plan that says we can do this, but all we need is $20 million, probably not a high, that's a pretty high risk scenario. So we probably won't be proposing that one. And then once we have that analysis done, the presentation of the scenarios to you guys so that everybody can have the benefit of the work that we've been, the data we've been gathering, the analysis we've been putting together, and we can see how it all comes together collectively. And at that point, then we'll, as a congregation, decide what scenarios do we want to pursue in substantially more depth. So that's the process that we're going through. And the timing, as may not be surprising to some, is taking longer than we had hoped. So, all right, so let's go on and take a look. From an appraisal perspective, we have to start with something. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to share with you a better understanding of what is our property here. What do we have? How does it all hang together as it relates to the potential for us to do different things with it as well as other people? And so if we could go on to the next slide, we've got a survey here. And I went out, I got this fabulous little pointer, and it points nicely on the wall, on the ceiling, not on the not on the slide. So anyway, so what we have is we have 4 acres of land, and that land is obviously everyone knows the frontage, right? We're all clear on that. The land goes to the other side of Wellman Creek. Okay, so our 4 acres includes land that's in that canal. Our 4 acres includes land that is the hike and bike path that goes behind there. Our 4 acres is not all usable, right? So that really has an impact on the value of what the land that we have because we can't use it all. Right now, it's defined in 2 parcels. You'll see here parcel A and parcel B. Parcel B, which is down on that end. Those are just historic subdivisions of the parcel, so of the site. So there's 2 parcels totaling the 4 acres, and that's how they work. So if we could go on to the next slide, we have, in addition to that consideration, we have some other factors that limit the usability of our site. And so you'll what we have here is a shaded area that has the Wellman Canal on the back, the hike and bike path. There's a high-pressure gas line that runs right, don't step too far, right there. And we have easements that run along the sidewalks on both sides of the property that go out to the street. And then right here, there's if you recall out there, there's a drain in the parking lot, and that is a part of a drainage easement that goes across the property in that way. So what you see is that the ability to redevelop the site is restricted. There's not that much land to work with compared to the 4 acres when we first said, oh, great, we have 4 acres. Well, we do, but there's some constraints. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. There's another consideration that shows up, and that is the floodplain. So it's not as easy. So you can see where our building outline is here. That's pretty clear. You can see the outline of the site. Here's where that other parcel is over here. Totally in the floodplain, 100%. Okay. There's 2 levels of floodplain that affect our property. That's the most severe flooding level. And then the lighter shade of blue is also in floodplain, but not as severe a floodplain. So can you develop in the floodplain? You can, but there are additional constraints, challenges, things you can do with it. The main thing that people do in the floodplain is parking. Right? That's most common use of floodplain land. So when you take these factors together, we're somewhat limited with what we're going to be working with. So let's go on to the next slide, please. And we have these out here as best we can. To be able to see afterwards if you want to look at them more closely. This shows you how we're using the site currently with the parking lot over on the west side here, as well as it shows just where the easements go and what have you. So we're using it pretty effectively relative to what the land use represents. Is there additional land available? Yes, there is, but we're doing pretty good right now. So if we could go on to the next slide, I want to share a little bit about what are our improvements. What do we have here? And so we're working with a gross building area of 10,600 square feet. We have 120 parking spaces. 59 on the south and 61 over here on the west side. So about half and half. We have a water well. I'm not sure everybody was aware of that, but the water here is served by a well that's 12 feet deep, which is generally considered shallow. So we've been working on evaluating connecting to city water, and there's a variety of challenges associated with that. The C committee is not working on that, but it is being worked on, and I don't believe that a final decision has been made. We're also in the county. We're not in the city of Boulder, even though the city of Boulder surrounds us. And so that plays a role in some of the potential as well. We are already connected to the City of Boulder sewer line, and so that's good. One challenge with that is that the sewer line runs through the sky room underneath the ground. And so if there were a problem with that portion of the sewer line, getting access to it would not be convenient. Okay, so those are the factors that that are associated with the appraisal. So what we did is we hired an appraisal firm to actually do the analysis. We actually sent out proposals to 6 different appraisal firms, and we interviewed a couple of them, and we selected one. And the appraisal is available. Does anybody ever have trouble falling asleep sometimes? Okay. We can provide access to the appraisal. That will take care of it, okay? It will be no issues. So, all right, let's move on. One more slide, please. So we're in the county, and one of the things that happened when we lost the last preschool. Now, the preschool we have now is solid. They're doing a great job. Their business is doing well. But there are some restrictions associated with the zoning that we have by virtue of being in the county. And I just thought it might be helpful for people to understand those. So we could be a cemetery, a church, obviously, educational facility, bed and breakfast, park and or play field for day use, public recreation center, single-family dwelling, meaning one single-family dwelling. In the county, we would have the potential of having one home on this site, or a daycare center, which the preschool falls under. So there's not a lot of uses that are available in that zoning. If we were to annex into the city, we have actually a smaller number of uses, but we could put in more than one home. Exactly how many is a little bit hard to tell, and I'm going to talk about a little bit more of that in a minute. So the appraisers took, and again, the appraisal report is available. If somebody would like to see it, we can provide access to that. And they came up with, the next slide, please, some value conclusions that we ask them to consider. So one of those value conclusions, well, all of them are based on the fact that church sales, they went back to 2019, and the appraisal had the most recent transaction in December of 2022. There were 5 sales of churches in the Denver metro area that were used in the analysis. Churches don't sell on a real regular basis. And so one of the things that we are evaluating is, well, what if we just went out and bought another church? Well, maybe that would be an option if it was for sale. That goes back to our risk factors. What's the viability of accomplishing something? So the as-is value of the appraisal, they came at $3.2 million. That's what they came up with. If the property was to be annexed, they came up with $3.3 million. And we also asked them, what if we carved off the east end or the west end and sold that as a bit of a revenue source? What options would what kind of revenue might that provide? Well, you can imagine on the east end, do you remember back to the floodplain slide? Forget about it. It doesn't make any sense at all. So on this side, if their conclusion was that this west parking lot could be sold for $1 million, and the remainder of the site would be about $2.5 million. So if you put those two together, that's about $3.5 million. Okay. Let's move on to the last slide, not the last slide, the next slide. This is what I would like everybody to take away from this discussion today, and that is the value range is $3 million to $3.5 million. That's what it is. The 3.5, some factors have to come together to be able to get there. The 3 million, pretty solid. We should be able to achieve that. So 3 million to 3.5 million, if there's discussion, if there's thoughts about it or whatever, that's the economic realm that we should be working with. Okay, one more slide, please. We said, well, what if our friends at Boulder Housing Partners, which is the affordable housing entity for the city of Boulder. We had a meeting with them, we had a follow-up with them, and they actually would be interested in this site because it meets a lot of the criteria that they're interested in. However, in order for them to meet their economic obligations for things to work for them, we would need to be rezoned in the city with medium density. Medium density would allow 14 to 15 units per acre, and they would help us with that process because they know the people at the city fairly well. So in discussing it, and this was all just like back of napkin level of discussion, but the number of units, excluding the floodplain, because obviously you can't build there, maybe we could get 48 to 60 units. Maybe. More realistically, 40 to 50. We might have some conversation with some of the neighbors associated with that. But if we could do all that, and their ability to pay $75,000 per buildable unit, that would support a value of $3 million to $3,750,000. So the reason that we bring it up is because it gives confidence that that $3 million to $3.5 million, from another way of looking at it completely, is in the ballpark. It's reasonable. Okay. Questions to this point, because Robin's going to take over for the... Yes.
I have a question regarding, so we've got a lot of floodplain issues. Has there been any thought process of if we were to partner with Boulder Housing Partners and they built 40 units on this, what's going to happen? I mean, does floodplain affect their ability to build that many houses?
So the question is, for anyone who is otherwise looking, is does the would the floodplain impact the ability for Boulder Housing Partners to build apartments? And the answer is very directly it impacts them. And so if, for example, the zoning was medium density and it's 4 acres and you got 15 units to the acre, that would allow us to get to 60 units. So, and they would be happily paying over $4 million for the site, but that's not realistic.
Yeah.
That's not realistic. The cost of construction goes up, so that's not going to happen. Yes, sir.
Do those appraisals assume we're on city water, and is it less, do we get less if we're not on city water?
The question is, does the appraisal assume we're on city water or not on city water? And if we went back a couple of slides, we don't need to, but the $3.2 million assumes we are not on city water, and the $3.3 million assumes we are on city water. And as it turns out, the cost of getting on city water, $100,000 or a little more. Sir.
So, would we be automatically zoned for that many units if we went into the city, or would we have to request zoning?
The question,
Our neighbors would like it.
yes, the question is, would we automatically be zoned with medium density zoning, which might support this higher level of density, or would we have to request that? We absolutely would have to request it, and it would be an uphill challenge to be able to get that medium density. Whether it would be the neighbors or the city at large, it's possible. We go back to those risk factors. That's what, as a committee, we keep looking at. That's a riskier situation. Okay, Robin.
Henry?
Yep.
Yeah, would there be an intermediate approach? In other words, I'm familiar with Boulder Housing Partners. We live on 1 acre of land with 16 units in a co-housing community. So that is well known, it's demonstrated, and so forth in the Holiday neighborhood. But you said that in the remaining in the county, only 1 residential housing unit could be built here. If it's a city, maybe 2 or 3 houses could be built. We'd still have 2 acres of land, because that is without the floodplain involvement. So, did you look at that alternative?
Yes, so we have, and I apologize, it's not on the slide at the moment, but we did look at what's just the value of the land, assuming we could get some residential use at the city level of density, which is a minimum lot size of 7,500 square feet. That's the, of land area. That's the kind of the slam dunk zoning potential. It just doesn't get us to the same values as basically staying as a church. So the appraisal value is based upon somebody else coming in and buying it and using it as a church facility. Okay, Robin.
Could I have the next slide, please? All right, so far, these scenarios are the ones that we have been gathering data for. And the scenarios are, the first one is stay in the building as is, and it is not, and we have some of the historical data for that, but we're now in the process of figuring out what it would cost to, upgrade essentially everything. All of our heating systems, plumbing, electrical, they're all pretty old. They're going to, instead of just putting Band-Aids on them, we need to figure out what that would cost so that we can evaluate that first scenario. The second scenario is remodel the existing building, add on maybe, or up, or whatever. But we're also in the process of gathering data, and we have talked to the fellowship and toured and talked to their building volunteer who was in the whole process to trying to get a number, pretty much a number for what it would cost to do certain things. And we have also been talking to an architect, and we are in the midst of maybe getting a feasibility study which would address what things like that would cost. New building on the same site, so tear everything down, rebuild. Also, the feasibility study may give us some questions or answers to how much that would cost. Purchase an existing spiritual center and modify for our use. Purchase an existing building and modify for our use, mostly because there are only 5 spiritual centers that sold in the past, 4 years. So that's why another building might be an option. And then purchase a site and build a new church building. And that's why with the appraisal we found out, okay, well, how much is this worth? So how much could we possibly get for this land to go and maybe buy another piece of land somewhere? But as you all know, land is very expensive, and then we would also have to build a building. So these are everything that we're investigating and, collecting data for them, and so that we could put it all together, assign risk factors, and see what we come up with, so you all know options. You have options. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's our status right now. What we know. We know historic maintenance cost, and we know real estate values. What we need to know, remodel renovation costs, and cost to build new. And that's taking a while to get all of that information. Next slide, please.
Robin, if I
Yep.
can just-
Oh, sure. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention that as far as collecting some of that data, we tried very hard to find sources for that data that didn't cost us money, and we were not very successful. So we're going to the professionals, and we ultimately will be asking for, paying for some professional guidance on that base level of data.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so our next steps, an architectural and structural feasibility study. We're going to analyze the 6 scenarios, financial analysis, analyze risk associated with accomplishing each scenario, and then we're going to integrate the congregational visioning report that happened in the fall. We will have a presentation of the scenario findings to the congregation, and then the congregation decision regarding next steps. And that's not imminent. It's not going to take place in 2 months. It's going to be, it's going to be a longer process, because we need to make sure that we have considered all scenarios and gotten as much information and data as we can. Next slide, please. These are all the C committee members: Fred Cole, Mary Deneen, Janet Evans, Burton Lee, Diana Maiden, Robin Miller, and Whitney Wheelis. And if you ever have questions and you see us around, at church, you can ask us, hey, what's the status of this? Or what are you working on? And we'll try to answer questions if we know the answers to them. And that is the end of the presentation. So go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I'm curious to know I don't really know this world, so what does an architectural or the feasibility study and architectural, whatever that three-word
Right.
phrase was, what's that involve?
It involves a lot of things. So the architect we spoke to has engineers that he uses, so structural engineers and electrical engineers and all sorts of engineers, so they can actually come in and assess the whole building, and so that's part of it. The architectural part of that feasibility study is when we talked to the architect, we said, here's a wish list, right? This is what we would like. So it's going to cost this much just to do all this other stuff. But what our wish list is we need, so many offices, and we need seating for so many, and we need flexibility, and we would like, access to the outdoors. So there's this whole wish list. And so what the feasibility study will do is it will be sort of on this continuum where it's all you do is bring things up to code and fix the systems is like the first step. And then the next step is maybe we can give you some of what you want. And then the next step, so it'll go through how much everything would cost, right? And that's what we're looking at right now for the feasibility study.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And do you want to?
Yeah, just a little more color on that. So for example, in the visioning process, one of the things that was suggested is it would really be nice to have a space where we could seat more people. And so if we just for the moment said, well, could we just expand this space here? Well, if you think about right over here, and we wanted to expand this is a concrete block wall. That's quite different than moving a wall that is made of more traditional drywall. So they're going to be taking a look at accomplishing some of the objectives that our visioning process identified and what the challenges are or the cost would be associated with utilizing some or all of this building to live into that visioning process.
Henry.
Well, what we're talking about here is the scope of the project that we have in mind, and so many variables, like
Yep.
we want to have a seating capacity, let's say for 300. You told us that we had about 11,000 square feet, just under 11,000 square feet in the building perimeter, of the as-built perimeter. So for the presentation to the architectural consultants, did you say we want 12,000 or 15,000? Do we have a?
No. No, this is very preliminary. It was more about, this is our wish list. This is what we would love to have, everything. And part of what he can come back with is, well, maybe you can accomplish these things in these ways. We didn't want to say, oh, we want you to do this in 15,000 square feet, or we want you to do this by doing this. I mean, that's going to be part of, he has a better sense of how he can make things happen for a certain amount of money than we do.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure. Can I follow that up?
Sure.
And you've had site visits to the newly remodeled facility at
The fellowship?
the Fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
So what did that cost? Were they kind enough to share that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So their cost was $3.5 million. And what they did is basically took the building that they had to work with, and then they expanded out of that building. And of that $3.5 million, they had a $1 million gift that was the lead gift that was conditional upon eliminating natural gas use in the building. And so they put in a ground source heat pump system that they are very happy with, and state-of-the-art, very sophisticated system that was driving part of that cost. They had some flood mitigation issues that they had to address, which were different than ours because they needed to do some flood mitigation in order to support what they were planning to do. They didn't have as much usable land as we do, and so yeah, that's at the level of detail that we have available right now. We could probably get more if it was useful.
I would assume if you looked at the cost per square foot for what they added and remodeled, it must have been close to $500 a square foot. Did they tell you?
So we toured the building with a gentleman who was integrally involved in the actual construction process. He's actually continuing to be involved with the day-to-day operations, but he wasn't really on the finance side. So the answer is we don't know from that perspective right now. I can tell you there was one other piece of information we gathered. Some of you may be familiar with the Watershed School, which is over off of Alpine. And that school has bought a building out in Gun Barrel that's a warehouse building. And they bought that warehouse building, and they're planning to spend $200 a square foot to convert it into a school use. And so some of that conversion cost would be similar if we were to buy something. So that's just when you've already got the shell and everything's there and ready to go. So your $500 a square foot may not be off, but we don't have support for it. And by the time we come back, we will have support for that answer.
Hi. Do we have a sense of how much we think we could raise in a capital campaign, or a range from like conservative to stretch?
That would have been a good question for the last session, where David was answering questions. So the answer is we have had a very preliminary analysis, and someone who remembers specifically, correct me if I'm wrong, but we should be able to raise in the neighborhood of $2 million, and oftentimes churches will also go out and borrow some money, and that would be maybe in the neighborhood of $1 million. That's the kind of working thinking.
I'm not actually here. I'm actually next door at a new member class. But I'll chime in to say, a rule of thumb is something like 3 to 5 times an annual budget. The annual pledging, which is the goal this year, is about $400,000. So maybe that puts us in something like the 1.5 to 2 million-ish range. That's a little bit theoretical, but I think not unreasonable.
Do we have anybody at this point in the real estate market just kind of observing, dripping us? Oh, I don't need it. Can people hear me? Oh, okay. Oh, okay, sorry. Do we have anybody out there in the real estate market right now giving us a drip of buildings that are coming available that are possibilities, as well as potential buyers for this site?
So the answer is not definitively, but in part because we have those scenarios that we're evaluating, and we don't really want to run down too far on each of those scenarios until we collectively decide which ones we really want to focus on, and then we'll be in a better position. even if the perfect situation was to pop up today, I'm not sure we're in a position to make a decision. So,
What's your best guess we'll get to the decision point?
it's a slow process. I would guess, maybe in a year, maybe a little more, because we'll also have to get into the capital campaign. The capital campaign will be to raise the money for a particular direction, and so there's just a lot of steps between now and that point in time. Yes.
Are you getting any help from UUA in this process? Are there used to be professionals who could help you?
We've had help, guidance from the UUA on that capital campaign analysis, and to my knowledge, that's the extent of what we've had from the UUA. Are there other resources that they have available that come to mind?
I would explore that. I'm not current. I used to work for UUA, but I'm not current
Okay.
now on what professionals they have. But
The point's well taken. We can reach out to them. So the question was really, does the UUA have additional resources that we might be able to draw upon? And she's used to work there. It's not current, but we should reach out to them and see what they might be able to offer. And so that's a good suggestion. We can do that.
how about a loan from UUA?
The question is, how about a loan for UUA? Again, that falls into the category of something that we will be looking at in more detail when the time comes. Right now, we're focusing on those 6 scenarios, getting data and analysis that supports each and every one of them so that we can collectively make the best decision, which direction do we need to head, and then what steps are going to be required in order to accomplish that.
Do you know if our loan from Beach Aircraft has been paid off? Do we still have a mortgage?
We
On-
have no
on this-
mortgages at this time.
So it's paid off?
Yes.
Okay.
That's not aircraft. Beach Foundation, not aircraft.
Well, the money came
It comes from planning.
Yes.
Okay. Following up on Nancy Spears, trying to find out what help we might get from UUA, what about recent other ventures additional to in this area, building churches, remodeling churches within the UUA? The magazine we get often has things from around the country, Iowa, California, where churches are trying to do the same thing we are. Have we looked into those cases?
Again, they fall generally into the category of we're trying to get the data to support those 6 scenarios that we identified, and when we look outside the region, the relevance of that data kind of starts to diminish, and so we're trying to get information right from our area. We tend to live in a kind of a high cost of living, a high cost of getting anything done area, and so that's really what we're focusing on right now. And it's part of the reason that we've decided to go and actually hire this architectural firm. We have not selected one, but we're going to go that direction to gather that information more definitively.
And also to add on, yes, if any of other Unitarian Universalist churches have rehabbed, rebuilt, done anything, we are in contact with them, Henry, to talk to them. So like Foothills and also in Denver, Fred. Yeah, we will be trying to get data from them as well. So yes.
So there was a question this morning
Judy?
There was a question this morning that David answered about the sustainability or greenness of our plans. So will the architect that you are consulting be one that has experience in building green buildings?
Yes.
Thank you.
And let me also add that the architect that we're going to be working with for this preliminary analysis is not necessarily the firm that we'll work with to actually do the design work for what we ultimately end up doing. Maybe, but not necessarily. Anything else? Are we done?
One more.
Oh,
Tom?
sorry.
It's my understanding that the city is trying to put some pressure on the wells back here. This one big block, excuse me, it has the 6 wells because the city of Boulder is providing police and fire protection for us. And they're wanting us to become part of the city, which means we'll have to start paying some taxes that we may not be paying right now. Will that affect our ultimate decision on what way we'll be going?
I'm not sure that all of your assumptions are correct, that we would end up paying taxes, because we don't pay taxes as the entity that we are. So I don't think that would be a consideration. The cost of annexing, yes, but and tying into the city, but not the taxes.
I didn't turn around to see who had that information, but I live 3 doors east of the church. I have a well, and the city has not contacted me.
Okay. So possibly the comment could be rephrased. Would the city like everybody who's not in the city, that's in an enclave, to be a part of the city? Yes. Do they have the ability to require that? Probably not. Yeah.
As a neighbor, my understanding is if they require it, the expenses greatly change. It's if we choose to do it, we have to pay 100%.
Okay, good point. Any other thoughts, questions, suggestions?
Could you clarify what you just said, that your microphone cut out? What was the...
Oh, so the way I understand what her comment was that the cost, if the city comes and says, we need you to annex into the city, the cost of accomplishing that gets shifted more towards the city's side of the ledger. If you, on the other hand, ask to be annexed into the city, then the property owner bears that expense. Is that?
If you choose.
If you,
Right.
yeah.
And the discussion has been, if we don't have a reliable source of water, then we're in the position where we may need to ask the city to accept us as being annexed.
It's a separate topic. It's being investigated very extensively, and there will be more information when that
The decision
actually
is made there.
is
Yeah.
ultimately what we're going to do or not do.
All right, well.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, thank you.